I think it's, thank you very much. We want Peter Blake. So Peter very kindly agreed to come across the pond to give us a talk today. And he seemed quite enthusiastic to do so. Some people believe this is because actually we'd like to get beyond football in the UK, particularly the Tottenham Hotspurs in London. Have I got that right?
Yes, very good. Back to that.
I'm not known for my knowledge of football, but I think it's something to do with football. So Peter is long-term researcher in peritoneal dialysis. He worked with Floriopolis in the early days of PD, and he was editor of Peritoneal Dialysis International for a period of time before Martin took over the role. Would you say you've done that, Martin? I don't know. And you also have been very influential in developing home therapies in your home patch, which is London, Ontario. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, for the introduction. First of all, let me say it's an enormous pleasure to be here. I've come a long way, you might say, from across the Atlantic, but I wouldn't have missed this for the world. Simon is somebody that has inspired me in many ways over the years. So to move this forward. So I want to begin by saying this is a personal tribute. So you're going to have to put up with hearing a little bit about me. It'll be a lot about Simon too. But to give me a little push this way, your son last night said to me, "How did you ever meet my father anyway?" So that's going to be something I will mention a little bit as we go through here.
I don't think that thing works.
I'm not sure it does. Will I just do? You tell me. So we have some commonalities, first of all, as to how we met. I put this together. We were born within months of each other in the United Kingdom in the mid-1950s. Simon likes to say I was born before him. A few months in it. We went to med school in the late 1970s, and we trained, I would say, with two nephrology giants in very separate places in the 1980s. This is Simon's giant, and I was very pleased that you showed earlier. Stuart Cameron, a wonderful nephrologist with an international reputation, and Simon trained with him. I had the privilege of training with Dimitris Oriopoulos in Toronto, who was a person who really put PD on an international scale and who sadly died in 2012. So each of us was initially had a research focus on peritoneal dialysis. We each got a staff position here in Keele for Simon and in London, Ontario for me in the early 1990s. And it's a bit of an understatement to say we've had some involvement in PD in a lot of meetings since the 1990s. I've seen it many, many times. I don't spend as much time eating and drinking and traveling around in my photo taking, but I don't know where we got time to do all those papers. And now here we are all these years later, and I think we're both thinking, in fact doing, gradual retirement. It's poignant for me. How we met, you asked. I had to remember this. Let me give you some little background about me. Because I trained with Oriopoulos, we did a number of papers in even in the 1980s, changes in membrane transport in people in CAPD, urea kinetics in people on CAPD, serum albumin and what it meant. We even touched on the membrane, though I never published the darn paper. It was always in an abstract form. So I see this guy publishing stuff from Stoke and presenting abstracts at ASN. And at one of the meetings in the early 1990s, I sought him out at the poster session. And we met, and we've been meeting ever since. The meetings progressed from being at poster sessions to being at, bars, restaurants, lots of places. And it's continued ever since. Back to that later. I want to pay some tributes to Simon, and on his many talents, and I've listed a few of the areas I'd like to talk about him. The clinical research has already been done in great detail here, so I'm going to keep that part much briefer and skip some slides and focus on the others. Mark, you touched on this. Why is Simon so good? I've learned over the years a lot of intelligent people in medicine and nephrology. They're not all as successful as Simon. He may be more intelligent than them, but in addition, he has other characteristics. He's a focused, I try to get the words right here, every adjective here is meaningful. He's focused. There's a sequential, logical approach. I've already said he's intelligent, that's a unnecessary sort of addition, you know that. Thoughtful attention to detail. Mark alluded to the fact that he uses observational studies where they're best. Because many problems, randomized trials are not feasible. This membrane stuff doesn't lend itself to randomized trials. But there are other areas, for example, in volume management, where he's done that very well. And then these other things, passionate and relentless about it. He never stops, and he follows things through to completion. How often have many of you in medicine, nephrology, had a good idea, but you didn't quite get it done? I don't think that happens. I don't think that happens with Simon. And that, I think, is, some of these are the qualities that have made him such a huge success as a clinical researcher. And I want to make another point, and I talked to John Feely about this earlier. There is a feeling in nephrology circles, particularly in this country and in the United States, and indeed in Canada where I work, it's fading away a bit now, but the dialysis is a sort of inferior form of science compared to the proximal tubule and the distal tubule, how the glomerulus works, and even to things like glomerulonephritis, which is a little bit more bench science oriented. Dialysis is perceived a little bit as a technology, and so people looking for peer review funding have to fight a little harder sometimes. And I think you need to see Simon's superb career in the context of that. This guy got funded because excellence wins through every time, I think, in the end. But I think it's an important observation. Peritoneal dialysis does not lend itself to peer-reviewed agencies to quite the same way that other areas of nephrology do. It's changing, as John Feely said earlier. I won't go through this. I'll go through it briefly, but these are Simon's key studies over the years. The membrane, this is everything. He did it better than anyone else. He had numbers. He followed it through. It was excellent. And I'm just not going to spend time on that. This was my favorite paper that I take to the desert island, and Edwina is sitting with me here. And she, along with Simon, had the EAPOS study, or the EPOS study, however you like to pronounce it. It was published in the early 2000s. There was a number of papers came out of it. And these are the graphs I most love. And Mark, you alluded to this, where Simon showed the dissociation that occurs between D over P, it's a measure of peritoneal transport, and volume removal. It's a linear line for a while, and then after 4 years, it stops being a linear line. And Simon showed convincing that this is probably due to fibrosis in the peritoneal membrane. And then he produced more studies on this coming out of EAPOS, and some of these studies were mind-blowing. They were three-dimensional, and you have to look at the graph, you think it's simple, and then you realize you're in more dimensions than you might realize. This one particularly showed that icodextrin seemed to stay linear, whereas if you were on dextrose, you had this deterioration. Wonderful stuff, I thought, and this one you've mentioned. The randomized trials were in volume, and again, I'm not going to spend time on that. I'm going to move on to other parts of the talk and take a little more time on them. But these were important randomized trials, and this was a wonderful culmination of all your membrane work, Simon. A New England paper, and while Olivia Davies is the senior author, Simon's role in this is huge. And many other people, I think some of you in the room here, including Mark Lambie, are on this paper. Some excellent people. Sorry, this is the randomized trial I meant to allude to earlier. We've heard about it. I won't drag it out, but it was a beautifully done trial with many different ways of measuring patients' volume and dialysis, positive results. Subsequent trials with bioimpedance were not positive, but I couldn't agree more with whoever said it. I think it was Martin, that negative trials are very important in medicine too, and it's safe as going down cul-de-sacs. So let me move on from that. Simon's also been a great leader, as has been said already, in various research groups. I've listed 4 or 5 of them there. I think that's important. Not every good scientist is able to lead others, and that's how collaborations develop. And he's done that wonderfully well. He's also given time to the broader community, particularly in PD. President of ISPD, International Society of Nephrology Dialysis Committee chairs, ISN Kidney Failure Strategy, Saving Young Lives with ISPD. You don't get paid to do this stuff. This is hard work. Sure, you get to go to a lot of dinners, as you noticed, but it's a wonderful effort, and Simon always puts everything into it. EuroPD, I think, has played a huge role in that. Akim Yares is here, also been involved, many other people, but Simon has been a consistent factor throughout and has made that work. I was very pleased to see the Kidney Research UK. I doubt if they've had a peritoneal dialysis person on their trust before, but he's now joined that, and I think that's a wonderful influence. So how would you measure Simon's academic legacy? So I did a little informal study. I thought up these questions myself. Who have been the United Kingdom's leading academic nephrologists from the baby boomer generation? Now, United Kingdom produced some wonderful nephrologists born before 1945. The aforementioned Stuart Cameron, Huda Wardner, David Kerr. These are names many people in this room will know very well. But what about the baby boomer generation? Because things have moved on a bit in nephrology. That was the founder generation in a sense, and now this is the more recent generation. So I'm going to say people born after 1945. I'm going to ask the same question, not about the UK, but about the whole world in peritoneal dialysis. The criteria to answer this question are, I'm looking for sustained high quality and quantity of research, clinical relevance and impact, academic leadership, and mentorship. The methodology is not up to Simon's standards in research. I basically contacted 10 people. I can't say it's random, who do I know? I tried to make sure they weren't all related to peritoneal dialysis. They came from 4 different countries, at least 3 of them were from the other side of the Atlantic. And what I'm looking here for is a little bit of outside perspective, what people think. So this is very informal, and but let me show you what I found. Who are the UK's leading nephrologists? You're all thinking in the room who's on this. Some of you are on it, list yourself. These are the names that got mentioned more than once by the 10 people. Some of them couldn't do it right. They kept bringing up names. Cameron was in every second list. So was other people born before the 1945 cutoff. John Feely is in the audience here. The fact that he's at the top doesn't mean that he got the most votes, but it's incidental, but John maybe. The late Donald O'Donoghue from Manchester. A whole lot of people from the GN area, you won't be surprised maybe, these get a lot of prominence outside Britain as well, the Hammersmith Group, so on. Savage, Charles Pusey, David Jane, Liz Lightstone, David Wheeler, Phil Cowrie, you know many of these. Chris McIntyre, who used to work down the road, is now working in London, Ontario in our division. And Edwina is sitting at the table, and Edwina being bottom of the list is absolutely not meaningful. So now I asked, there was one nephrologist in particular, he's very little to do with dialysis, and he produced 2 totally different names that no one else produced. And I want to do a little quiz here on who this is. I'm going to show you the picture of this guy. He visited our unit in London, Ontario. That's me in the far way there, but the man beside me. Does anyone know who he is in the audience? Would you, John Feely does. Anyone else before I ask you to name him? You do as well, okay.
I think so.
I don't think UK nephrologists know much about this guy. He's big league. Who is he?
He's a Peter Ratcliffe Fellow of the Royal Society, Nobel laureate.
A Nobel laureate who's a nephrologist from the UK. And yet I find most UK nephrologists are not very aware of this man. I guess he didn't do a lot of dialysis rounds and stuff like that. But anyway, thought that was interesting. This guy, my colleague, also mentioned. Does everyone or anyone know who this is?
Yes, Will.
Okay, so again, he doesn't come up on any of the lists, but this guy has been a co-editor of the co-author, a lead author of many of the SGLT2 papers. So these guys are both in Oxford. We're going to rule Harrington out of this. He's too young. He's born probably in 1980 or something. And Radcliffe, it looks like nephrologists haven't adopted him, but he did win a Nobel Prize. But we'll leave him out. So I think Simon Davies wins. I put him in at the top there based on people I talked to. Sorry, John. Sorry, Edwina. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but I think Simon is judging, using the criteria given you, UK's finest academic nephrologist of the baby boomer era. You may disagree entirely, but I think it's true.
Shouldn't we have a vote?
I think he might win here, even with Phoebe.
You want to suffer?
Even Phoebe might vote for him here. I did the same survey with international PD nephrologists across the whole world. Ripa, rest in peace. Olivier Davies, Raj Malhotra, the only one from the United States. David Johnson, a wonderful investigator, a clinical investigator from Australia. Two from Hong Kong, that Swedish guy down at the bottom there, Heimberger. Edwina for her wonderful work on in PD, and the elderly especially. I had other great names, Morel, Lamelia, Bette Lindholm, you're there. Slingenaar, some of these people are deceased now. And we did the vote, and I did the judgment again, and you know who won again on based on the votes? Simon, you're buying me more than dinner, okay. So I would submit to you that Simon is right up there in the firmament of nephrology as perhaps the finest UK nephrologist of his generation, post 45, and in the PD world also. Am I flattering you enough?
Embarrassingly, but
okay, the rest of the talk, I'm gonna now take the other approach and roast Simon. Let me just clarify the roasting word. It means making fun, that's all. Other sides of Simon. So I thought a bit about this. It's not easy to make fun of Simon. I would have called you guys maybe, and should have got help. I said to a few people, is there anything, we can ridicule Simon about? One of them said, he's nerdy, the peritoneal membrane, all those formulas, he's got to be nerdy. The trouble is, we're a specialty of nerds. We all love KTMV, KFRE, TTKG. We love formulas. We went into nephrology partly because it was mathematical. We thought we were much better than the cardiologists with their catheters and all this. So not much scope there. The other thing people pick on is the dress sense of doctors, and particularly scientists. They're all supposed to be, not really noticing how they're dressed or whatever. Thought about that a bit with Simon. Before I came to this meeting, I told my wife Rose that I was coming here, and she said, "Are you going to wear a suit?" I said, "Nobody wears suits anymore to meetings." Excuse me, gentlemen. She said, "It's a special event. You should wear a suit if you're speaking there." So I sent him a text, and he sent me a text back saying, "I'm not a suit sort of guy." Something along that line. I'm not a suit person. So I looked out at this. This slide sticks out for the bizarre background. I have no idea. Was it another bar, or was it, not sure. This one, very straight. That could be a suit. This one, he looks like he's eyes bulging, things coming out of his head. Is the plant attached to him? It looks like it's a very odd photograph. What I have noticed in recent years is that Simon is showing a little bit of definite effort to be very stylish in his choice of spectacles. I think, am I right? Are those purple? Are they matching the shirt? Did his daughter or his mum or his wife
say about the colour of those glasses laughed at me. Khaki green.
Khaki green, okay. And then, better still, look at these. Wow. I mean, how many of you have the courage to buy red glasses and wear them, I was impressed with that. What else can I do with Simon? Oh.
I'm his sister.
Wonderful. Simon the Surpriser is the last bit. Again, it's back to me for a moment here. I think I mentioned this, or somebody mentioned it from the audience. Apart from nephrology, and of course my wife, I left that out, my non-nephrology passions are these two: football. I was born in the UK, grew up in Dublin, but I've been in Canada for 35 years. But I love football, and Tottenham Hotspur are a passion for me, no matter how often they mess up everything and lose. And one of the joys of talking to British nephrologists, you would think could be you could discuss this, but they're mostly a complete dead loss. Most of them are either not interested in sport, or it's that oval ball they love. Exception down here, Dr. Ken Farrington, Manchester United fan, and of course Donald O'Donoghue, rest in peace, was also a great soccer fan, as was Ram Gokul. However, Simon is a dead loss here. The other topic is rock music from the 70s. I presume many of you who grew up in this era will know what I'm talking about. Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, if you were really out there, The Who. These were all, that was my idea of music, and I remember it always, and I still have, played these songs rarely now. Neither of these topics seem to inspire much interest with Simon. The subject got changed, and we had a lot of meetings, we talk about lots of things, nothing to do with nephrology often. These two, no way. And then I got a surprise. One day he said to me, during a conversation, I'd been at a Tottenham game on the way to a meeting, he said, you know, my wife is a Stoke City season ticket holder, not just a fan, a season ticket holder. How do you live in the same house? When Jane comes home, do you discuss like how did the Stoke midfield do today and so on? Or does he just pretend it never happened? Last night, one of you said he'd once been to a game. I don't know how you achieve that. It was a birthday party, a treat or something. So Simon the football fan, yes, well. The other one, and this, by the way, I brought this up with him once. I said in the 90s, this guy was like Davies, Welsh soccer player, playing for my team, Tottenham. He had no idea who I was talking about. So that was the revelation. The rock music fan, I did not find out that he was a rocker, but I did find out. He mentioned this briefly, that he did a bit of singing as a youngster. But I'll always remember this. In 2012, he was president of the ISPD. There was an event afterwards in some hotel room or somewhere, I can't remember where, and all the good and great of PD were milling around, and Simon came out and sang. And the whole place was stunned, and I was too. He doesn't sing like Plant or Ian Gillan or one of these guys from rock music. He had a beautiful voice. He was a cantor. And it was something else. So I've said here, the president sings. And I think he was a little shy, but it really went well. And I subsequently found out a lot more about this. Simon, as many of you know, but maybe you don't all know, since the age of 12, he's been singing. He has won music scholarships. He sang with the Manchester Chamber Choir, the King's College Choir in Cambridge. And as somebody mentioned, I think we're going to hear about it tonight, Simon has gone back to the University of Birmingham and has a degree in music composition now. I looked at this, Simon the conductor, and I thought, wow, it's a great picture. I think that's in Manchester. But I thought of it's like arranging a nephrology collaborative group. You know, Simon's in charge, and it's like IAPOS or BioPD or whatever. I don't know. You know, he's got everything under control. It's working. He's a great leader, and he's a great conductor, obviously. There is a website, and I won't steal you're going to talk to us about this tonight, but you can now listen to Simon online, Tuning This Curious Heart. I'd like to finish by saying, Simon, I think he's a friend. He is a friend. I don't use that lightly. Our relationship was built up over many years, dozens of conferences, dinners, drinks, let's face it, committees. I've never been a research collaborator, but that hasn't stopped us getting to know each other. What's so special about Simon? His intelligence is obvious. His curiosity is a wonderful thing too. He's a real stimulating company. The breadth of his interests, apart from football, everything else he knows about. But also empathy and integrity. His kids are slightly older than mine. There are traumas that you all know about bringing up kids at the moment, even when they're over 21 or over 25. And I remember conversations where he probably doesn't even remember, but he helped. In a way, just to talk to somebody who doesn't live next door, who's not gonna, or who isn't at work with you and say, God, what do I do about this or that? I particularly remember a conversation in, of all places, Sharjah in the Emirates, where there's no alcohol allowed. So it just shows we're more than just boozers. And but his empathy, and also it comes out not only in his personal life, but in his research, is his integrity, his belief in truth and importance.
And I love the comment, I didn't catch the name of the person earlier, the patient's perspective. This is so important. David, I think it was. David, I think you said it beautifully. This is what this man is about. It matters to him. He's not a scientist in an ivory tower. So in summary, Simon, a superb academic nephrologist, a superb focused clinical researcher, a leader and a builder, a really great guy, and a privilege to know you, Simon, and I'm so glad I got the chance to come here and speak. Thank you. I don't think people are going to ask me questions, really.
No, I'd just like to say that, you know, most of that was nonsense. But very nicely put. Very nicely put. Certainly, you know, value friendship hugely, as with many other people in this room. It's fantastic to know what, yeah. I may elaborate on 1 or 2 points later on when I talk after dinner. But yes, thank you.